The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise today on the 26th of April, 2023, in this honorable House on behalf of the great constituents of St. Anne's and the wider people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is time well spent in the House today. I'm very pleased to be here with my colleagues on the opposition side representing the Free National Movement under leader Michael Pintard, as well as government, PLP, members of parliament for different constituencies, led by the Honorable Prime Minister, Representative for Cat Island, Rum Cay, and San Salvador, Philip Edward Brave Davis. Mr. Deputy Speaker, today we have an opportunity to participate in what is fundamentally the most important aspect of human society. That is the recognition and protection of our human rights. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the idea of human rights is that each one of us, no matter where we are born, is entitled to the same basic rights and freedoms. In 1215 AD, the Magna Carta was signed by King John. I have a copy of it here today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm not laying it before the table. Originally written in Latin, and if you're an attorney, it's one of the first principles of law that you get introduced to when you're studying. 1215 AD. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was the first document Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was the first document to put into writing the principle that the king and his government was not above the law. Mr. Deputy Speaker, later in the recognition of human rights, the U.S. Declaration of Independence in 1776 acknowledged that every human being has the right to life, liberty, security of his person. Also, all persons are equal before the laws and have the rights and duties established without distinction as to race, sex, language, creed, or other factor.
But you had slavery, right? Exactly. You had slavery, exactly.
Don't let them deter you.
Slavery. They didn't apply to that. Slavery.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the aftermath of World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, a group led by Eleanor Roosevelt, after 2 years of meetings, came up with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was something that after 2 years was approved by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris in 1948. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my good colleague from Freetown has already gone through a number of the articles of the Declaration of Human Rights. But just in case nobody was listening to him at the time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am going to read some of those articles now. All human beings are born free. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in the spirit of brotherhood. A key fundamental human right, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that all men are equal, and as the Bible teaches us, we should do unto others as we have them do unto ourselves. By Article 2, everyone is entitled to all of the rights and freedoms set forth in the Declaration of Human Rights, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on this basis of political, jurisdictional, and international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty. And the third article, which is a fundamental right that you'll find time and time again, is that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. As the good member from Fort Charlotte was saying a moment ago on the same topic by Article 4, no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. And by Article 5, Mr. Deputy Speaker, no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in all, there are 30 articles under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that were passed by unanimous decision by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as we continue on the journey of human rights, and if I can, I'll just go back, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because I've brought a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that came into force in January of 1963. This was done and signed by U.S. President Abraham Lincoln, and it came into effect on the 1st of January, 1863. And it reads, of importance to my contribution here today, that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord 1863, all persons held as enslaved within the state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall be in rebellion against the United States, shall be thenceforward and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no act or acts to repress such persons or any of them in their efforts they may make for their actual freedom. Mr. Deputy Speaker, human rights have a complicated history, but those that are alive now have a general expectation that what is in our history is not the way we want our future to be. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in 1973, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in 1973, under our Constitution, Chapter 3, Article 15, subheaded Protection of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms of the Individual. Article 15, whereas every person in the Bahamas is entitled to a fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, that is to say, has the right, whatever his race, place of origin, political opinions, color, creed, or sex, but subject to the rights and freedoms of others, and for the public interest, to each and all of the following, namely, A, life, liberty, security of the person, and the protection of the law. B, freedom of conscience, of expression, and of assembly and association. And C, protection for the privacy of his home and other property, and from deprivation of property without compensation. It goes on, most importantly, the member from Freetown touched on this, and it's a distinction that we all must understand, not only in our Commonwealth, but throughout the world. It goes on to say, the subsequent provisions of this chapter shall have effect for the purpose of affording protection to the aforesaid rights and freedoms subject to such limitations of that protection as are contained in those provisions, being limitations designed to ensure that the enjoyment of said rights and freedoms by any individual does not prejudice the rights and freedoms of others or the public interest. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we look at the UN Declaration on Human Rights, when we look at the commandments of our Bible, when we look at the U.S. declarations of independence provisions on human rights, we look at the U.S. Emancipation Proclamation and our Constitution, we have to pay attention to it all and examine, especially for the purposes of this committee, how it relates to our local issues. A key fundamental United Nations Declaration of Human Rights principle is that all human beings are born free and equal. It recognizes the principle of non-discrimination. Does our Constitution discriminate against our women? Will this committee, if appointed, be able to conclude that we are not in breach of the UN Declaration on Human Rights because our Constitution does not clearly state women may pass on citizenship to their children? The UN Declaration on Human Rights, Mr. Deputy Speaker, also refers to negative freedoms, the freedom from torture. We often hear claims of beatings by persons that have been in police custody. Claims is all that I've said. Will this committee be able to conclude that we are not in breach of the UN Declaration of Human Rights because of what some members of the public view as inadequate investigations into claims of police brutality when such offenses are found to occur, that there is inadequate repercussions? Mr. Deputy Speaker, the UN Declaration of Human Rights also recognizes the freedom of movement. Not long ago, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think it was just earlier this year, Human Rights Bahamas gave a press statement in relation to the case of a Kenyan man detained for more than 6 years by the name of Gumi. The press statement reads that Human Rights Bahamas The statement reads, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that Human Rights Bahamas welcomes this landmark Privy Council ruling, which has clarified once and for all that the current detention practices of the Bahamas Immigration Department are illegal. The ruling affirms that Human Rights Bahamas has stated repeatedly the authorities have no lawful right to detain a person suspected of violating the Immigration Act for more than 48 hours at absolute maximum. They must either bring such individuals before the courts or release them immediately or deport them. Further, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it confirms that even after a person pleads guilty and is convicted of violating the act and a recommendation of deportation is made by the courts, the authorities cannot continue to hold that individual for more than 2 working days in the absence of a signed deportation order. Human rights defenders, both at home and abroad, have repeatedly condemned the excesses and unlawful actions of the Immigration Department, which regularly deprive individuals of their constitutionally protected liberty for weeks, months, and even years at a time, subjecting them to cruel beatings, torture, and appalling conditions in the meantime. This ruling, Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, draws a line in the sand. The status quo cannot be allowed to continue. And it concludes, Human Rights Bahamas calls for an immediate, transparent, and complete review and overhaul of the protocols and policies governing immigration enforcement with the aim of finally bringing the activities of the department in line with national law, international best practices, and universal standards of common decency. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are instances of personal freedoms being deprived from the innocent throughout the world. When I first got involved with my pursuit in continuing a legal education, it was aspects of miscarriages of justice, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that intrigued me the most. Cases like the Guilford Four, cases you would hear out of the United States of America, where above all else, justice must be seen to be done and the innocent must be free. In addition to Mr. Gumi, you have other cases in our history where persons were seen to have been illegally detained, and it cost the public treasury significant sums over time because awards for their unlawful detention were granted to them. Some of the individuals include Joseph Amiri, held illegally for 7 years. Attain Takitota, 8 years. Matthew Sewell, nearly a decade. Mr. Deputy Speaker, issues of human rights violations are real in our Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The Declaration takes no sides on which rights are more important to other rights. And we must remember as a nation, as we sit on our couches in our offices today watching Channel 420, the parliamentary channel, or listening at our desks to the radio, that at the end of the day, the UN Declaration of Human Rights is a declaration and not a hard universal law. To monitor the applications of such rights around the world, the function of this proposed committee at the legislative level shall play a critical role for the realization of human rights at a national level, to then facilitate the government's compliance with those human rights obligations on regional and international levels. Mr. Deputy I now intend to conclude my contribution. It's unfortunate that the member from Freetown is not here at this moment, but it's possible that the good member from Fort Charlotte can put his KC legal eye on the drafting of this resolution, because I believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that there is a conflict between the fourth recital and the first resolution. And I've tried to raise this already, and some members, excuse me, Mr. Deputy, if I can conclude now.
Yeah.
The member knows he's correct, and he would like to
Thank
conclude,
you,
Mr.
Honourable
Deputy
Member.
Speaker. I don't need any member from that side standing up and repeating what I know. You have your opportunity to speak. You do so when it's your time. There is a conflict, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in my view.
Order, members.
There is a conflict, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the fourth recital and the first resolution. And it's a simple correction that can be made at committee level, but if I can, I'll bring it to your attention now. The fourth recital reads, "And whereas Parliament is desirous of constituting a committee to comprise of 8 members of Parliament, bracket, 5 members of the House of Assembly and 3 members of the Senate, close bracket, to be responsible for monitoring the protection and enforcement of human rights in the Bahamas." And then the first resolution in conflict reads, "Now therefore be it resolved that this House approves the constitution of a committee of 5 members of Parliament to monitor the protection and enforcement of human rights in the Bahamas." Mr. Deputy Speaker, I propose that the first recital be amended so that it reads, "The House approves the constitution of a committee of 8 members of Parliament." And Mr. Deputy Speaker, with that said, I'd like the public to know that I support the appointment of this committee, and like each and every one of my fellow colleagues on the opposition side, I hope to be one of the few privileged to serve and bring attention to the important issues of various aspects of human rights in our Commonwealth. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The chair